Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, celebrity interviews, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again. But for our radio audience here in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM and WYADonline.com, we're glad that you all could be with us. Also, is joining us our friends at iHeartRadio and Amazon Music Podcast. We're glad you all could be with us as well. Well, I tell you, this week is not only recognized as Children's Book Week, but it's also Get Caught Reading Book. And I have a great book for you guys to add to your reading list. And we have the author that's here with us as well. We're excited to welcome Elizabeth Fee to our program today. The author of the new book in the How to Survive Middle School series, World History, is the title. This book is so good. It gives you guys so much information when it comes to history. Of course, it's great for young people, but I think us adults can learn a lot as well. We'll talk to Elizabeth about her own love of history and what it was like for her to be able to research for this book. Also, we'll remind you how you can get your own copy of it as well. Elizabeth, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So I really enjoyed this book, Elizabeth. I love history myself. I remember in school, even though that was a very, very, very long time ago for me at this point. But I can remember being excited about history, but also reading books. And you have given us a great book in this series to be able to really look at world history. What has it been like for you to have done the work for this book, Elizabeth, and now to have it out for us?
Oh, wow. Well, great question, because it was kind of my saving grace during the pandemic, right? So the series was written rather swiftly, and I began it in December of 2019, and I think we finished the final edits maybe in March of 2021. So wow. It was my labor of love during a really challenging time for the whole world, and I'll just always remember it in that sense. Also, I did tons and tons of research, and it gave me an eye into what's important in research. And so when the book was finished, we actually included an additional chapter at the end about how to think like a historian. And in that sense, the book became even fuller, in my view, especially based on my own experience with research, that there's such an abundance of information for kids these days that in fact, they don't really need a paper book to look at, right? They have their phones. But what's coming at them is such a wide array of info that they need help discerning, what's valuable from what isn't, and really managing the information load. So that's the way that my research connected with the actual writing of the book and what I hope it will really do for kids.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, Elizabeth, for us adults as well, because I have to admit, there's a lot in this book that even as someone who loves history, as I said, I did not know. One of the things you talk about that should be an obvious question, but my friends will tell you, Elizabeth, I'm not a very obvious thinker, and that is, why did they choose African slaves in the first place? I never thought about that question before. and you addressed that in this book for world history. I mean, what were those little tidbits, again, things that should be obvious for us to think about? What were those like for you to be able to explore and then to share?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was intentional in trying to portray a view of history that is inclusive and that challenges assumptions, and that also highlights those who have been marginalized in traditional history as it's told. So, you mentioned slavery. I mean, I think that this is something that has to be understood, in the context of development as a whole globally, and certainly of our country. So, I gave a great deal of thought to this. My curriculum advisors were really helpful, and we sought to hold up the truth as best we could find about history, and that means making it more accurate, making it more inclusive, and challenging traditional notions about history and assumptions that people make. That's just part and parcel of teaching history, especially today. We're proud of that.
And then there's other things that are literally ripped from the headlines, Elizabeth, that are in this book. Women's rights is another thing that you talk about in the book, women and social change. And then, of course, COVID-19. Unfortunately, at the day that we're having this conversation today, the United States of America is just marking 1 million deaths when it comes to COVID. And it was interesting in seeing when I was prepping for this segment that at the time that this book, of course, was done, of course, COVID-19 was killing more than 2.6 million people as of March of last year. What has that been like for you to see how this history continues to unfold?
Well, we were joking that, like, the book really needs to be a blog because, history is being made so quickly that, it'll just be impossible to update a paper book. But, I'm hoping there are ways to create further volumes that explore news that is developing, on an ongoing basis. But, what we did do that I like is we put this pandemic in the context of historical disease, right? So there's a chart somewhere in the book so that kids can understand that pandemics aren't new to the world and that they've been dealt with in various ways. So, it is a moment in history, and it's like we wanted to keep on adding chapters. Now the war in Ukraine. Not in the book, right? It couldn't be. But I think there are ways of understanding war in the book that are themes that would help middle school kids to grasp some of the conflicts in the Ukraine, honestly. The power struggle for territory is, pretty much the story of history, at least as far as conflict goes. So, it's always going to be impossible to tell the whole story of history, and that's, in fact, what we talk about in Chapter 1.
Right. And, Elizabeth, I want to step out and ask you a personal question here about this book and just about this journey of sharing this with young people. And again, as I mentioned, us adults, if we're willing and we are able to take in the information, I think we can benefit as well. Is that why you wanted to make sure that this type of information, this really, I think, clear look at history was targeted toward young people because they are still willing to change, evolve, and are not as stubborn as we adults can sometimes be?
Well, that's why I love working with kids. That's a great question. I was a sixth grade history teacher, and kids will soak up what you give them. And coming back to the thinking skills idea, like I know what good teaching is, and we've learned from the pandemic. There's an article in the New York Times today by David Leonhardt just about learning loss and the discovery that remote learning was a failure. It does require in-person teaching. However, a book can do a lot to open up history for kids. And again, these thinking skills, we call them survival skills that are embedded in the content throughout the book, challenge kids to think for themselves about these issues so that it's just not a passive drinking in of history. We're encouraging them to take a close look at certain sections and to think critically about some really big questions. And those are definitely appropriate for adults. My hope would be for families to read some of these things together and talk about them and grapple with the big questions that we all kind of have to work on answering. So, ideally, families would have time to look at these books together. I do hope teachers use them, but they're not intended to be textbooks, and they're not set up like that. So, I'm so excited that these books are on sale. As you know, there are 5 in the series, and the Times article today is all about learning loss in math, but it goes without saying that this would be in reading and all the content areas as well. So it's time for a publication like this that's friendly to kids, that encompasses learning beyond content into thinking, and that's a tool for families. So
exactly.
I'm excited, and I love working with kids, and I just can't wait to start imagining middle school kids digging into this.
Wow. Yeah, and I think they will, and I'm glad that we can help spread the word about it, Elizabeth. Again, everyone, Elizabeth Fee has been our guest talking about the series, How to Survive Middle School. The book is World History, and just as the book says, beware, this book might make you smarter than your parents, and I totally agree with that. It is available through our friends at Amazon.com or through your favorite local bookstore. If they don't have it, I know they'd be more than happy to order it for you. Elizabeth, where can our audience go to stay connected with you?
Oh, to stay connected with me? Well, the book is for sale on Amazon, and the editors can put them in touch directly with me if this is something. I would love that. They'll give you my
Elizabeth,
email.
Congratulations to you again, and looking forward to speaking with you again on the program.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, more than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live. Now let's go make today amazing. Take care.